The word convey is to carry a message of some kind or to communicate.
Communicating different people, so it could be myself with the other creatives here or the audience.
The idea that when we convey one message to another, does it really mean the same thing, or is that something different that we lose in between this dialogue between two people?
When I first saw the word convey, I think about this boat that's carrying a thought that's just flowing down the river.
It's how you put the thoughts in your head and bring it out to somebody to show your point of view or your perspective on the world.
I think convey is a very interesting idea, to use art as language between people.
I'm Marylyn Tan, and I'm usually a poet. Sometimes I do prose, sometimes I do erotica, sometimes I do short stories, but mostly I write in the tradition of postmodern or transgenre poetry.
Hi, I'm Daryl, so I'm an illustrator and educator. I love kind of using illustration to make things that people might find boring a little bit more interesting. So it could be, history, it could be science, cultures, making things more accessible through illustration.
My name is Crispin. I am a poet, or at least I like to think that I'm a poet, but I like to write about experience and the self, so I guess you can call me a confessional poet.
My name is Pix, and I am a comics artist. I would describe my work as observational, reflective, colourful.
I'm Charlene Shepherdson. I'm a writer and a visual poet, so I write poetry but also try and include some visual elements into it. Sometimes it's meditative, sometimes it's experimental, sometimes I don't quite know what I'm doing with it, but it works. So I think I'm somewhat instinctive with what I do and what I plan to say.
Hi, my name is Gwee. I am a poet and a graphic artist. I like to do things that kind of mix a bit. I really like to eavesdrop because that gives me a sense of what people are thinking and talking about. But when it relates to myself, I guess sometimes when I'm caught in uncertainty or caught in some very strong emotion, I try to convert that into verse or art in a way so that I don't indulge those emotions too much.
It's the first time we're doing a live event in a long time.
I was very surprised that such a large event was happening at the end of the year. But I'm also quite excited, and also because I don't really have a sense of what to expect.
When I first heard about this event where you're told to respond to other people, we are also doing this while in recovery from a pandemic where we've been cooped up. It's a big welcome to to just engage with others.
So far, I think my poems have been translated more into music. For someone to do some visual interpretation would be very interesting.
Words carry so many different forms of meaning, especially from the point of view of a writer and also when reinterpreted from the point of view of an illustrator. It's a matter of seeing what the writer intends in the words that are there, and also whatever extra meaning I find from the spaces between all these lines.
It's always nice to see how people interpret the words. So I think when I draw it, it comes out differently from an illustrator drawing it, because the words may be the same, but what your reflection on those words might be different.
When I first came in and I mentioned it to everyone, I'm just amazed by the size of the space, the enormity of it.
It's a huge space, very inspiring, awesome space, unusual space I think for Singaporean writers especially to be engaged in.
I always look at huge spaces with this amount of envy because I don't get a lot of space in my life, and to be able to sprawl out and use the space creatively is not an opportunity that comes by very often.
The aesthetic changes when you go from a space where you're full of clutter to a space that there is space to walk around, to think, to assemble ideas.
I was assigned the writing pod, which was on stage the whole time. It wasn't really a pod, it was more like a see-through greenhouse in which you could see the fecund growing of my blossoming work just sprouting across the page and being excellent. My initial reaction to being in the pod was that it kind of looked like a diner. So the first thing I wrote on my paper was, "Hi, welcome to Chili's." So it was great, except that nobody could see what I was writing because I wrote it in pencil. So anyway, hi, welcome to Chili's. So my inspiration was triggered by the history of this building and what I was feeling in terms of what it was made of, because industrial buildings are always full of concrete and iron, and then I was thinking about iron as something that repels fairies and repels spirits in the Western myths. And then I was thinking about how many rats have died in the walls of this building because it's a very old building. And I was thinking about its colonial past as well, and all of the migrant workers that have definitely passed through its borders. So it all came out in a nice little cluster. Given the constraints, I think that I tried to have fun with it, and I tried to give Crispin a hard time. Crispin is the guy who's coming after me. And I enjoyed that it was location-based, because very often I come up with two abstract ideas and I kind of like try to juxtapose them with one another. But this one was, very material, and I like talking about the body, and so it was kind of new for me because I don't usually engage with something historically as well.
Coming after Marylyn, maybe the response would be, I will just wait and see. But at the same time also, Marylyn's a dear friend, and I love her writing. So I think one of the things that I will come into this is that how can I capture the energy of space? How can I capture the energy of the crowd? How can I bring in my own flair and yet also nicely blend it in with Marylyn's style of writing and the subjects that she's familiar with? I'm coming into this with a game plan, but at the same time, I am going to switch things out, I guess, along the way. That's probably what the 25 minutes is for.
I'll be the first illustrator starting off and working with Marylyn's poems. I would say it's kind of like, how you step into a gallery. You step in a space, you just kind of stand there, get a sense of what it's like. You don't spend too much time on each of the individual artworks, but just really kind of take it in first before jumping in and focusing on maybe certain lines or certain phrases that really catch my eye.
I was assigned the study. It was a great experience. I think it started off very nerve-wracking because you see all these people sitting around and you're like, they all have an in-joke. They all know what the poem was before. And then when it came to my turn, it's like, oh, I'm actually the clueless one here. I thought that the kind of expectations that I was going to get from Marylyn, I think was the thing that really got me excited.
The first stanza was by Marylyn. So I think the first thing that struck me was how kind of gritty it was. And it's almost like a reflection of the space in itself, the power station. So what I did was that I had kind of a massive black bird, and I think that's referencing the amazing image, the amazing kind of key visual. And it's also something that I wanted to bring about since, we talked about ghosts in the poem, and it's almost something that's floating, a spectre that's hovering over there. And also there was mention of rats swallowed in the walls, I think. So I imagine that, these ghosts are kind of overlooking what happens. I wanted to build upon the idea of teeth also. So we've got the idea of condominiums, we've got teeth and pillars. So very kind of vertical, they look visually, they're very consistent. And thought that, just kind of presenting them as a mass at the bottom. So I'll leave it up to the audience to decide, which ones are the actual condos, which ones are, the pillars and all that.
So the word electric sort of triggered me. I also wanted this idea of what does the body utter that might be electric. So I sort of bounced around the idea of the mechanical body, what it says, what it doesn't say. So one of the things I wanted to do actually was to sneak in the word convey. So I think for me, I wanted to play punctuation because I wanted to give a challenge to piece in as well. How do you translate punctuation into visual representation?
I was assigned to respond to Crispin's poem, and in it he had this mention of like the body, of carrying, of holding. Maybe not the exact words, but I think my memory of it is that of something, you know, like a hug or something that felt very warm. And so the first image that comes to mind was to draw a person and like the face and the body, and I just sort of worked from there.
I saw my table, which was a very long table, and then the scroll. And so my line that I had to write from is, and all this that remains, or something along that lines. Yeah, so I was just trying to figure out what could remain, or what would remain at the end of everything. I've been watching a lot of like skeletons being unearthed, so I think what kind of came to my mind was a lot more about like bones being buried. Ended up being a bit more about like the environment, about, you know, people pinning their hopes on their concepts and stereotypes in a way, like this idea of stocks. Overall, I think it was more about just the environment and kind of like a warning shot to like kind of take care of it.
Okay, so for the next one is by Charlene. I would say evocative in terms of, you know, the idea of a promise, kind of looking forward. There's some degree of hope, but at the same time it feels a little bit suffocated already. Again, you know, the first thing I did was to think of certain images that would pop into my mind. And then there was a mention of an elephant, and when we talk about bones, you know, the idea of an elephant's graveyard. So that's how I kind of imagined the scene being set up. But at the same time, you know, building on Pixin's lines, and some of the lines that I could see from the previous illustration, I was thinking about how, you know, these very kind of flowy shapes could form vines, and how there's some semblance of life that still flows through, that it kind of builds towards the other side of the image, you know, moving from death to some idea of life.
I was the last, so before that I had a bit of a waiting time, which I spent first drinking Red Bull, then I drank coffee, then I had red wine, and after that I think I'm in a very strange mood, and I fell asleep, and then they woke me up to come to stage. So practically my brain was a blank. I was asked to sit in a lounge, and I saw the scroll on the table. I became conscious that this is a constructed room and there are people sitting around watching me, and I just drew on what I felt then. The falsity of the space leaps out at me, and also the sense of loneliness, because even though I am in a space with other people around me, and yet, you know, I feel locked away to do something. And I felt that that was pretty much like the current situation each of us experienced under the pandemic, and I think that sparked the whole connection. Well, I didn't actually intend to rhyme. I think that was actually something I decided on the spot. I think my mind wasn't connected well just now, and so the rhyme scheme kind of helped bring a shape to my thoughts.
Second poet was to respond to Gwee's poem, and in it he talked about the coffin, death, the pandemic. I would say there's a lot more visual cues from Gwee's poem, whereas Crispin was a lot more emotional somehow. So for Gwee, it was in a way easier to respond because I'm a visual person. Like I started drawing a tomb and then a body lying inside of it. I just sort of carried on from there. It helped that I was also responding to Daryl's inky brushstrokes. One of his brushstrokes that was very hard and I felt was very energetic. I sort of decided to draw like a fire that was burning this tomb. It ended with like a funeral.
I like the idea of having artists from different disciplines coming together to collaboratively create an artwork. I think that's something new and interesting for the art scene.
I was actually only prepared to stay for 1-2 hours, but I ended up staying for the whole thing because you really see six artists and writers develop a whole piece from scratch together.
I think it's really interesting. It's something that I've not attended before. I'm not a very creative person, so seeing the artists create something live, I think that's really brave. And for me, it's something interesting to learn from at least.
I think this is the first time I've attended an event like this in Singapore. So I think it's a good initiative and it was good to see how the poems and the art takes form.
I really liked it. I thought it was a very innovative format, having artists and poets come together to create the work together. It was very interesting. The results speak for themselves, yeah.
I wish I had been able to talk to the audience more, but because of Miss Rona, we aren't able to do that. Even if I hadn't talked to the audience, I could have, maybe made eye contact with them. So the only thing I was making eye contact with was the camera above me, and that was okay. It wasn't the best, but it was the best we could do in these trying times.
I feel it's great. Why are we not doing more of this? I like the sense of not knowing and having the audience know more than you. This whole relationship with what's happening around you, what's happening with the other artist, as well as how you're playing with that final line from the previous poet makes this experience all the more engaging.
It's been fun. It's just nice to be out in front of people and kind of performing, because I used to do typewriter poetry and performance poetry. So it's just nice to be with people as I'm creating rather than at home writing on my own.
It's great. I think it's pretty interesting, a kind of fascinating setup. I'm looking forward to seeing the whole thing fleshed out, irrational connections made across, and whether the piece hang together. There's going to be much meaning in the meaninglessness.
Definitely very exciting because you don't know what you're going to expect. I mean, both from the side of poetry and also from the other illustration. I would also say it's super scary because I don't know how the audience is reacting. I don't know whether I'll finish it, whether how it's going to look, whether it kind of makes sense, or whether how it even relates to the previous illustration. But I think I'm happy that I managed to finish it. There were no kind of accidents and everything went smoothly.
Today is just one cluster. It would be cool if there's just different clusters and you just see the variations of voices and thoughts and expression. We know right now, as of filming this, is due to a lot of restrictions on number of people gathering and whatnot. But I think hopefully when things get a lot better, it's nice to have a lot more clusters.
Dirty migrant truths, speaking teeth like iron filings, a pillared place fairies can't enter, feeding a mincing nation. Industrial strength ghosts mutter concrete, gasping, tell me how many rats swallowed lead in your walls. Will we cede you to the condominiums? A station, power bottom, without a prick of uttered electric.
I sing of the body, all charged, all machine, all joy. This given pleasure, all mine, to covet, to hold, to convey in a scream. This is what I wish to say, but I can't. To give the body, organs and all, heartfelt and committed, this flesh-born message spelt out, all blank and until this is all that remains. Must I?
Until the last citizen believes, promise this. Petrichor in air petrified. Elephant memory is ivory poached. Cities felt on a whim. All forests, a treasure unearthed, stalks of stalks, wings that protect futures struck down. Only skeletal remains remember how hope sucked from tomorrow's bones.
You are already dining in your tomb. You are already dying in a pandemic room. The world vaccinates itself in overtones of secrets spilled out all over our phones. The day must sleep in the faithlessness of text. This performance is in much anti-climax. It has all begun with a playful hint, and this is how the world ends, in small print.